I'm of the third culture. I'm a product of multiple cultures. The digital ether has accelerated the breaking down of old cultures and given birth to a new and emerging third culture. The box has been opened. There's no going back. The third culture is a young and undefined place, full of freedom and potential. Regardless of this, we are seeing a resurgence in old ideas that seem to be rejecting this inevitable change. While based in fear, these concerns are not completely unwarranted. There is a fear that comes with the unknown. What I will soon talk about is an attempt to shine light onto this unknown, and in the process make life easier for those who may find themselves there. This video, the first of two, will be split into 3 parts. In the first, I will introduce a concept of the ego that is the significant foundation of this work. In the second, I will identify and explain the inevitable change taking place globally and the danger of the grey area that this change puts us in. Finally, in the third, I will introduce an identity that acts as a solution to this problem, and I will go on to talk more about this identity in the context of today's world. In many ways, I was what you can call a narcissist when I first left my home. In reflection, I was at war with the world. Over time, my eyes opened, and I realized that this outlook was the product of pain, the pain of rejection and a lack of belonging that was the result of existing in an in-between. The following quote is from the book The Power of Now, by the author Eckhart Tolle. The quote goes, "One day you may catch yourself smiling at the voice in your head, as you would smile at the antics of a child. This means that you no longer take the content of your mind all that seriously, as your sense of self does not depend on it." After reading that book, I realized that I was not as in control of my thoughts as I thought I was. Because otherwise, why would these thoughts be causing both me and others pain? There was a moment in which I visualized this dark entity shooting out painful thoughts. I realized that if I had no control over these destructive thoughts, over this entity, I was a slave to my mind. In his book, Tolle says, when each thought absorbs your attention completely, it means you identify with the voice in your head. That mentally constructed self is a parasite and feels incomplete and precarious. And that's why fearing and wanting are its predominant emotions and motivating forces. When you recognize that there is a voice in your head that pretends to be you and never stops speaking, you are awaking out of the unconscious identification with the stream of thinking. Most people spend their entire lives imprisoned within the confines of their own thoughts. They never go beyond a narrow, mind-made, personalized sense of self that is conditioned by the past. That was a big realization for me. What if my thoughts are not in my best interest? What if they are not in the interest of life itself? I mentioned earlier that when I left home, I was a narcissist. This was because the parasite of self needs conflict and something to contrast itself with, because that's how its sense of identity gets strengthened. I was in the third culture, you see. I felt discontent with my identity, and in the process, an extreme form of individualism took place. This is because the parasite needs to fight against this or against that, in the process demonstrating that this is me and that is not me. If I had not the strength to resist my parasite, in turn allowing it to feed, I would be contributing to the cycle of pain. You see, where there is cruelty, there is always pain underneath. And so much of our collective pain is the compounding of malicious decisions driven by the parasite, constantly looking not only for food for thought, but also food for its identity and sense of self. Cruelty causes pain, and pain results in cruelty. It is a vicious cycle, and is how the ego parasite continuously nourishes itself through the ages. It is the ego parasite's desperate and never-ending attempt to fuel its identity that has caused and is causing the conflicts of history and the present. The wars of tribes and nations, which all derive a strengthened sense of collective identity from having an other to be contrasted with. In other words, who would the believer be without the unbeliever? It was so hard accepting this unfolding realization because I was so emotionally dominated by my parasite. I felt intense pride and power and found it hard to accept that I had to let go of these things in the name of growth. I am telling you now that there is another place for this life force. We will dive deeper into that in the following sections. Change is the only constant. Everything you touch, you change. With every change, changing you. You only need to look into history to see the horrors we are capable of being driven to. The genocide and mistreatment of millions across all groups of people in all places. While so much of this cannot be rationally explained, it can be accepted that so much suffering finds its cause in the ego's desire for an other, which in turn results in collective delusions. The Rwandan genocide, the Armenian genocide, the Holocaust, the Spanish Inquisition, the Bosnian genocide, the Gaza genocide, Japanese war crimes, the list goes on and on. In its desperate, never-ending search for fulfillment, The parasite within has driven our species, as if in a mass psychosis, to inflict evil upon our fellow human, all in the name of whatever collective delusion we have been entranced by. While we are suffering deeply in parts of the world today, the world is definitely a less cruel place, and as time goes on, it will further improve. You see, life on this planet is resilient, and evolution is constant. All life evolves in a manner that best guarantees its survival, and in our case, that is an evolution towards unconditional love, as its fostering of cooperation is more productive in ensuring the improvement and expansion of our species into the stars. This evolution towards unconditional love finds famous examples in the case of, for instance, Christ or the Buddha. Both shared the core message of love your neighbor as you would love yourself. This very statement is at odds with the ego parasite that is so desperate to feed itself in separation with an other. Many argue religion has caused so much suffering, but do not be mistaken. It is the parasite ego that is the cause. You see, the stronger your life force, the more the parasite ego has to feed off. Many crimes done in the name of a higher cause were the results of great people not having the strength to resist their parasites, and subsequently, without realizing it or not, corrupting the truth. In these times, we have been blessed with the internet, with music, with the media, with greater interconnection. We travel and are exposed to others from all walks of life. Greater education and general human development are all making it harder for our parasites, the ego, to build its identity in comparison to an other as per the old world means. By old world means, I am referring to religion, tribe, clan, ethnicity, or nation. As the world inevitably becomes ever more interconnected, we naturally start to see through the old chains and comparisons that our egos have been built upon. It is an organic process. We are starting to outgrow those great callings. I often hear people joke that countries now would not be able to muster a volunteer army, as if that is a sign of weakness. That is a sign of evolution. Our warrior spirit remains, only now we have awoken past the delusion of ego identification. And with our increased interconnection, we are reminded that we love our fellow human. How on earth can it feel right to take up arms against another human in the name of outdated false identifications? Real recognizes real. Just as authenticity is recognizable, it is in our nature to both see and call out what is rooted in evil. When we see that something is wrong and unauthentic, we find it hard to not do anything. This is our powerful life force at work, and this is where we can channel it. As I said before, the box has been opened. There is no going back. Our increasing interconnection will continue resulting in the growth of the third culture. As it is so new, no wonder that our egos, which are based on the fear of uncertainty, are falling back into ideas aimed at rejecting this change. We are experiencing a new far-right wave in many democratic countries. The process I am going through has been long and organic. Once you awaken, you enter an area of uncertainty in which you feel you have no foundations to belong to. You can be subject to the devils of nihilism, narcissism, and psychopathy. Those of the old identifications have a valid concern. You see, you have awoken from old identifications, but you are still subject to that parasite. If one has no grounding collective identity, why is there a guarantee that one will resist the pull of these devils? In other words, with great power comes great responsibility. The entity, now free from any sort of collective identity, will look for food elsewhere. Those collective identities of old grew organically and thus developed mechanisms to counter the pull of anything that is detrimental to the wider social group. But once you are on your own, once you are in what they call the third culture, you are prone to the pulls of nihilism, psychopathy, and narcissism. The fact is, though, that there is no going back. The box is open. We also do not want an Armageddon between those of the old identifications and those who find themselves ungrounded in the third culture. It is clear that the formation of something is needed in the third culture, something aimed at countering the parasite's tendency to be pulled towards the devils of nihilism, psychopathy, and narcissism. In conclusion, those who have outgrown the old collective identifications as a result of our ever-advancing world could be more prone to falling victim to this ever-evolved and relentless parasite. In this section, I will argue that the something in the third culture aimed at countering the parasite's desire to be pulled towards the devils of nihilism, psychopathy, and narcissism will take the form of an identity. This work argues that it is the unknown nature of the third culture that induces fear from already established collective identities, and that these fears are not completely unwarranted due to the chaotic nature of identifying with the young and undefined third culture. The provision of an identity deals with this problem by bringing order to the chaos through the provision of a meaning, purpose, and sense of belonging in the third culture. 1. Purpose. The evolution, expansion, and thriving of our species is a goal that is universal and encompasses all others. I said before that change is the only constant. All that you touch, you change, and all that you change, changes you. The fact is that all life evolves in a manner that best guarantees its survival and success. For humankind, that is an evolution towards unconditional love, as understood by Christ or the Buddha. This is because a humanity existing closer to unconditional love ensures greater cooperation and thus thriving and expansion. We have indeed evolved closer towards unconditional love. I said before, we just need to look at how much of a better place the world is now compared to history. Social advancements, medical, scientific advancements, the world is a much better place. We may be on Mars within a decade. The survival and thriving of our species is all that matters and a goal that encompasses all others. So that is a purposeful life. However, in order to act in accordance with this mission statement, you need to believe in a collective consciousness that is common to humankind, one life form in evolution. Regardless of if you are convinced, we can all agree that the world does not revolve around me or you. We are all one species living on one Earth, one small dot in space. If you do not agree with this, and you live a life in which everyone exists to serve you, you do not have the strength to resist that parasite. Believing in a collective consciousness is effective in instilling a responsibility in each individual in a manner that makes life worth living while also contributing positively to the evolution of our species. Each individual is an expression of the collective consciousness of humanity, and change is the only lasting truth. Each individual, and in turn the collective consciousness, is in a constant state of dynamism. The beauty of human existence is that it is our every decision, our daily manner in which we interact with reality, that determines what kind of change occurs. In other words, every individual is responsible for the change that occurs in the collective consciousness. This change can either be a state of evolution, refinement, and improvement, or devolution, degradation, and degeneration. Which path is taken depends entirely on you. It depends on if you agree with the statement, "The world does not revolve around me or you. We are all one species living on Earth." Regardless of religious belief or outlook on reality, the above statement is the key towards unlocking peace, progression, and evolution. For spiritual people, this evolution of our species, of our collective consciousness, is one towards unconditional love or unity with God, as for instance in the case of Jesus Christ or the Buddha. It exists in truth, compassion, love, and integrity, as opposed to fear, manipulation, and control. For others, such as atheists, the same is also true. Change is inevitable, and it is undeniable that if an individual has a worldview in which the world revolves around them, their interactions with reality are at the extent of the species and of life itself. Understanding that we are one on this ball of earth is beneficial to the species and is an evolution in a manner that best guarantees its survival. I am somewhere in the middle. I actually believe the two are the same thing. Just as a religious or spiritual person would argue that the true path is unconditional love or oneness with God, it is an increase in unconditional love in the collective consciousness that would best guarantee the survival of humanity. For a united and loving humanity can prioritize the expansion of the species and consciousness into space. Now that we have covered the overall goal, I will provide a mission statement that can aid anyone who wants to contribute to the evolution, expansion, and thriving of our species. A goal that is universal and encompasses all others. Mission statement. Number 1. The evolution of the inclusive attractive field of consciousness to interact with the world in unconditional love. Number 2. To be both a source and example of life, health, and success in the world. The evolution of the inclusive attractive field of consciousness to interact with the world in unconditional love. There is a brilliant book called Power vs. Force by Dr. David R. Hawkins. His work is very useful in visualizing this evolution. Though I believe that it is impossible to quantify something so divine, if this interpretation can help you visualize our evolution and purpose, that is a win. I said at the start of the video that regardless of if you believe it or not, the idea of a collective consciousness, though may be hard to grasp, is a great way to live a life with purpose and meaning. Believing that we are all connected in a field of consciousness or unconsciousness gives you a massive responsibility, and it is responsibility that makes life worth living. Again, everything you touch, you change, and everything that touches you changes you. You have a responsibility to think. At its core, is every interaction with reality or people serving my parasite or serving life, and in the process contributing to the inevitable evolution of our species? Is your interaction with someone bringing them up with you in evolution and life, or devolution, by pushing them down in order to feed your parasite. For the butterfly effect is real. Everything you touch, you change, and everything that you change changes you. Every interaction that comes from a place of unconditional love is a contribution to our evolution as a species. Everything is part of a larger whole. Everyone is involved in the evolution of the all-inclusive attractive field of consciousness itself. It is this evolution, innate to the overall field of consciousness, which guarantees the salvation of mankind, and with it, of all life. To be both a source and example of life, health, and success in the world, to channel and tribute life and God. Quite simply, we have a duty to be both an example and source of life, health, and success in the world. In other words, fill your cup so that you can abundantly pour for others. There's so much pain in this world. It compounds over time. It takes strength to absorb it for others. Be that person. There's someone out there who's in pain. They are experiencing cruelty, yet are keeping strong and refusing to continue the cycle. Be strong for them. By striving to become the best version of yourself, you are paying tribute to the divine. It is possible to fill your cup without taking from others. Be strong, be excellent, wealthy, and aesthetic. Be an example of healthy life expressing itself and thriving. Like a beautiful flower or a massive colorful bird fluffing its feathers, the butterfly effect is real. In this process, you will be both a source of life excellence and an example for others, bringing them out of despair, degradation, and degeneration. The stronger you are, the more resistant you are to the parasite. Despair and degeneration lead to evil, as it is pain and weakness that brings about cruelty and the parasite. It is therefore your duty to be excellent, to inspire, and in the process, bring people out of despair and towards health and happiness. The more thriving someone's life, the more full their own cup is, the more inclined they will be to contribute to the evolution of the inclusive attractor field of collective consciousness. I said earlier in the video that there is a place for your warlike energy. You must be strong, for there are those who can't resist the pull of their parasites, those who will therefore feed off others just as they are being fed off. There is a place for your warrior instinct. Balance is key. Remember that self-condemnation is the same as pride. You need to be balanced and excellent in order to recognize these monsters and fend them off. There is indeed a place for your killer instinct. Be strong and channel this instinct to fend off predators and evil people, those stuck in ego, narcissism, and psychopathy in devolution. Be the ranger helping usher our species towards evolution. To belong to the earth and not to these borders. In today's context. While this identity is primarily aimed with bringing order to the chaos of the third culture, it is organic and thus not directly tied with those who find themselves there. I believe that anyone, regardless of identity, can find a renewed meaning in this universal message. For those who feel rooted in patriotism, nationalism, and other tribal groupings, remember, they are not evils. As I said earlier, you have a duty to be excellent, aesthetic, and successful. If feeling some pride in your tribal group and identity helps you do that, so be it. I do believe, though, that this is a double-edged sword, and you must be careful not to fall victim to your parasite. Balance is key, and you must remember the all-encompassing goal. In the third culture, I often look to the West, in particular the United States, as a beacon of advancement and light for the all-encompassing goal. The United States offers a unique example of what it means to build a collective identity, not based on a singular race, ethnicity, or religion, but on shared ideals. These principles alone break the United States free from the chains of the ego parasite, which, as mentioned before, needs to latch onto divisive groupings in order to sustain itself. The American experiment is therefore part of our evolution, being founded on principles of freedom, equality, and the belief that people from all walks of life can come together to form a unified society.